The person who destroyed my life was not a stranger. She was the woman who held my hand at my mother's funeral. The woman who drove 3 hours in the middle of the night when my relationship fell apart at 26. The woman who knew every embarrassing story from my 20s and never used a single one against me. Not until it was useful to her. Her name was Jess. And with one lie, one single carefully constructed lie, she took my job, my reputation, my relationship, and very nearly my will to get back up. I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking you would have seen it coming, that the signs would have been obvious, that you would never have trusted someone that completely. I thought the same thing about other people's stories. Then it happened to me, and I want to tell you every part of it. Not because I need the sympathy, I'm past that now, but because I know that somewhere in the people watching this, there is someone who has a Jess in their life right now. Someone they trust completely. Someone who is quietly, carefully, doing exactly what Jess did to me. And I want you to recognize it before I did. So let me start from the beginning. Jess and I met in college. We were assigned to the same dormitory floor freshman year and became inseparable within the first 2 weeks in the way that only happens when you are 18 and away from home for the first time and desperately looking for someone who feels like safe ground. She was from a small town in the Midwest. I was from the East Coast. We had almost nothing in common on paper and everything in common in practice. We laughed at the same things. We stayed up until 3 in the morning talking about everything and nothing. We went through our first heartbreaks and our first real failures and our first taste of adulthood together, and by the time we graduated we were the kind of friends that other people pointed at and said, those two will know each other forever. We did know each other forever, just not in the way either of us imagined. After college we ended up in the same city by a combination of intention and luck. We shared an apartment for 2 years in our mid-20s, which taught me things about Jess that living in separate dorm rooms had kept hidden. She was messier than I had known. She was more competitive than she appeared. She had a habit of comparing herself to other people that she disguised as casual observation, but which I could feel, if I paid attention, running underneath every conversation like a current. I paid attention. I noticed it. And then I made the choice that I have thought about every single day since this happened. I set it aside. Because I told myself that everyone has edges. Everyone has parts of themselves that are less comfortable to look at directly. And the rest of Jess, the loyal, funny, generous rest of her, was worth the occasional discomfort of those edges. I want you to remember that I made that choice consciously. Because it matters later. It matters to understand that I am not someone who was simply naive. I saw something true about Jess and I decided it wasn't important enough to act on. That decision cost me everything. And I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you who I was before any of this happened, because the betrayal only hits the way it hits when you understand what there was to lose. My name is Elena. I'm 37 years old. At the time this happened, I was 34, and by any reasonable measure I was doing well. I had built a career in marketing that had taken years of unglamorous, unrecognized work to establish. I was a senior brand strategist at a communications firm called Meridian Group. I had a team of 6 people who trusted me. I had just been shortlisted for a promotion to creative director that I had been quietly, consistently working toward for 3 years. I want you to understand what that promotion meant. It wasn't just a title. It was the validation of a decade of work. It was the answer to every early morning and late night and moment where I wondered if the effort was worth it. I had built something real, carefully, and without shortcuts, and that promotion was the moment it was supposed to be acknowledged. I had a boyfriend named Marcus. 2 years together, the kind of quiet, solid relationship that doesn't make for exciting stories but makes for a life you actually want to live. He was steady and kind, and he made me laugh in the specific way that only the people who really know you can. I loved him in the grounded way, not the electric, breathless kind of love, but the kind that feels like foundation. Like something you build on. I had an apartment I had decorated over 3 years until it felt genuinely mine. I had a life I was proud of. And I had Jess, who I believed was proud of me too. Here is the thing about watching someone you love succeed when you haven't succeeded in the same way yet. Most people handle it. Most people feel the flicker of something uncomfortable. Envy is human, comparison is human, and they let it pass and they go back to loving their person. That's what most people do. Jess was not most people. I didn't know that yet. Jess worked in the same industry as me. Marketing, different agency, similar level, or what had been a similar level when we started. Over the years, gradually, my career had moved ahead. Not dramatically. Not in a way either of us talked about directly. But the gap was there, and it had been widening quietly for years, and while I was not tracking it, Jess was. She was tracking it very carefully. The lie started the way the worst betrayals always start. Not with a dramatic decision. Not with a moment of obvious evil. It started with a small thing that seemed like nothing. Meridian Group had a major pitch coming up. A pharmaceutical company called Vantera, recently rebranded, looking for a new agency to handle their communication strategy. It was a significant account. Winning it would matter for the firm and, given that I was leading the pitch team, it would matter enormously for my promotion. I had been working on it for 6 weeks. It was the best work I had done in years. My supervisor Helen, a woman who measured her compliments like they cost her something, had reviewed the strategy deck and said it was the strongest pitch she had seen from our team in 2 years. I felt good about it in the specific way you feel good about work when you know you have left nothing on the table. And then I did something I have replayed in my mind so many times since that I have lost count. I told Jess about it. Not the specifics. Not the strategy. Not anything that would register as confidential information. Just that we were pitching Vantera. That it was going well. That it could be the moment that changed things for me professionally. I told her because she was my best friend. I told her because that's what you do with your best friend when something important is happening in your life. I told her because I trusted her completely, and I had trusted her completely for 14 years, and there had never been a single reason not to. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because I think some of you know exactly what I am describing. That specific kind of trust that has been built so slowly and so thoroughly over so many years that it stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like gravity. You don't decide to trust them. You just do. The way you breathe without deciding to breathe. That's how I trusted Jess. 2 weeks later, Meridian lost the Vantera pitch. We lost it to Jess's agency. I was disappointed. Of course I was. But I was not suspicious. Not yet. These things happen. Pitches are lost. I called Jess and congratulated her genuinely, and she was warm and gracious and said all the right things, and I believed every word of it. I believed her because I was not yet asking the right questions. That changed 3 months later. I was called into a meeting with Helen and the firm's HR director. His name was Robert. He was a careful, precise man who did not attend meetings without a reason. His presence told me before a single word was spoken that something formal had happened. Something with paperwork behind it. Helen sat to the side, uncomfortable in a way I had never seen from her before. Robert did the talking. He told me a complaint had been filed against me. The complaint alleged that I had shared confidential client information with an outside party. That I had leaked elements of Meridian's Vantera pitch strategy to a competing agency, directly resulting in the loss of the account. I remember the exact feeling of that moment. It started in my chest. A kind of dropping, like the floor had moved. And then it spread outward through my whole body until my hands were very still and my face was very still, and I was sitting in that chair feeling completely hollow. "That's not true," I said. My voice was steady. "I don't know how." Robert said the complaint had come from a credible source, that it included specific details, that there would be a formal investigation and that I would be removed from active client work in the meantime. Who filed it? I asked. He said he couldn't share that. I left the meeting and went to the bathroom and sat on the floor of a stall for a long time. Not crying. Just sitting. Doing the thing your brain does when it is trying to process something that doesn't fit into any category it has for the world. I ran through every person who could have done this, every colleague, every client contact, every person who had any reason at all. I built a list in my head and worked through it systematically. And I want to be honest with you about something, because this is the part of the story I find hardest to tell. It took me a long time to land on Jess. Not because the evidence wasn't there eventually, but because your brain protects the people you love the most. It puts them last on the list. It finds 100 other explanations before it will consider the one that would break something you have spent 14 years building. So I didn't consider her. Not that day. Not for weeks. I called her that evening. I told her about the complaint and the investigation. I told her I was trying to understand where it could have come from. She was perfectly horrified. She said it was outrageous, that I had done nothing wrong, that whoever had filed it clearly had an agenda. She offered immediately to be a character reference. She said she would do anything to help. I thanked her. I felt marginally better. I was looking directly at the source of everything I was afraid of, and I felt better after talking to her. That is how good she was. That is how much I trusted her. And I genuinely think, that some of you watching this have been in that exact position. Have turned to the person who hurt you for comfort about the hurt they caused. Have felt better for a few hours before the weight came back. If that's you, keep watching, because there is something in the second half of this story that I want you to hear. The investigation lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of sitting at my desk doing administrative tasks while my team ran the work I had built. 3 weeks of watching the creative director promotion go quietly, politely on hold. 3 weeks of walking into rooms and feeling that slight adjustment in how people looked at me, not hostile, just careful, just withholding a fraction of themselves until they were fully sure. Marcus was steady through all of it. He said all the right things. But I could see underneath his steadiness something that frightened me more than the investigation itself. A careful, controlled worry that he was working very hard not to show me because he didn't want to make it worse. Jess checked in every few days. She brought me lunch once. She sat across from me in the small cafe near my office and listened to me talk through my fear and frustration and said, "Elena, you know who you are. This will come out right." I looked at her face when she said it. I believed her. The investigation concluded without finding sufficient evidence to support the complaint. I want you to notice the wording of that. Not cleared. Not innocent. Insufficient evidence. Which sounds like vindication but lands like a permanent question mark. Like a small stain on glass that you can see if the light hits it a certain way. I went back to my team. The creative director process was technically resumed. Helen told me privately she didn't believe the allegations. I thanked her and went back to my desk and started rebuilding, which is what you do when something has been knocked down. You just start again. I was doing okay. And then Marcus came home one evening and said he needed to talk. There are specific phrasings that tell you everything before the sentence is finished. I need to talk, said carefully, with a breath before it. That is not a casual conversation. I sat down and I waited, and he told me he had heard something from a mutual friend named Patrick. Patrick had been at a party. Someone there, someone who worked in the industry, had told him that the investigation at my firm had actually found evidence of wrongdoing, but that Meridian had covered it up to protect themselves from the scandal of a senior employee case. I stared at Marcus for a long moment. That is completely false, I said. I know, he said. I believe you. I just thought you should know it was out there. He went to bed and I sat in the dark kitchen and turned that phrase over and over. someone who works in the industry. And something shifted in me that night. Something that had been refusing to move finally moved. I thought about the complaint. I thought about the way Jess had offered a character reference before I told her what the complaint alleged. I thought about the Vantera pitch and the way her agency had won it. I thought about 14 years of watching her watch my career and what that watching might have felt like from inside her. And at 2 in the morning, alone in my kitchen, I let myself think the thought I had been keeping at a distance for months. What if it was Jess? What if all of it was Jess? I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I started paying attention differently. Not snooping. Not accusing. Just noticing the things I had trained myself not to notice. The questions she asked about my work that were slightly more specific than friendship required. The way she always seemed to know things about Meridian's internal dynamics that I couldn't account for having told her. The way her career had taken a meaningful step forward in exactly the period mine had stalled. I started talking to people. Carefully. Just asking questions in the way our industry allows. Casual, over coffee, at the margins of events. Questions that seemed like general professional conversation but which I was listening to very specifically. What I found made me sit down in the middle of a coffee shop and stare at the wall for a full minute. A colleague at another firm told me that she had heard from someone at Jess's agency that the Vantera win had been unusually well informed about Meridian's approach, that their strategy had contained specific elements that felt less like competitive insight and more like inside knowledge. A former Meridian employee told me she had been contacted during the investigation period by someone claiming to do a professional reference check on me. No name given. No company named. Just questions about my professional conduct and working relationships. A reference check. When I hadn't applied for any jobs. I want you to understand what that means. Someone had been working the perimeter of my professional life for months. Quietly. Patiently. Gathering material. Building a picture. Not with one dramatic act, but with a dozen small, careful, almost invisible ones. Someone who knew the industry well enough to move through it without being seen. Someone who had been inside my life for 14 years and knew exactly which doors were worth knocking on. I called my cousin Diane that evening. Diane is an attorney. Not a litigator, she works in contracts, but she has the kind of methodical mind that finds things other people miss. I told her everything. All of it from the beginning. She listened without interrupting and then asked me one question. Do you have anything in writing? I went through my phone, and that is when I found the thing that I had walked past without seeing. The morning after I told Jess about the complaint, she had sent me an email. In it she said she was horrified, that she would do anything to help, that she wanted me to know I could use her as a character reference if needed. A character reference. Jess had offered a character reference immediately and specifically, but I had only told her that a complaint had been filed. I had not told her what it alleged. I had not mentioned character. I had not given her any detail about the nature of the accusation. She had known. She had known what the complaint said before I told her. Because she was the one who wrote it. I sat with my phone in my hand in the silence of my apartment, and I felt something I can only describe as the specific grief of a truth you already knew but didn't want to know. Not shock. Not surprise. Just the heaviness of a thing arriving that had been on its way for a long time. I called Diane back. I have something, I said. She came over that night. We went through everything together. The email, a text Jess had sent 2 days before the complaint was filed asking a pointed question about how Meridian handled confidentiality agreements with senior staff, and a LinkedIn connection Diane found between Jess and Robert, Meridian's HR director, made 3 months before the complaint with no obvious professional reason behind it. 3 pieces. Each one explainable on its own. Together, a picture that was very difficult to explain innocently. I made a decision that night about how I wanted to handle what I knew. Not screaming. Not a public accusation. Not the version of this that makes you feel powerful in the moment and costs you everything later. I invited Jess to dinner. My apartment. A Tuesday evening. I cooked, which I rarely did for just the two of us. She arrived with wine and a warm comment about the cooking. She looked completely, entirely normal. We ate. We talked. I waited until the dishes were cleared and we were sitting with our wine before I said a word about any of it. And then I laid it out. One piece at a time. Calmly. Without theatrics. The email and what it implied. The text about confidentiality agreements. The LinkedIn connection with Robert. The industry contacts and what they had told me. The reference check that had no legitimate reason to exist. I watched her face while I talked. She went completely still. When I finished, there was a silence that felt like it had weight. Then she said, "Elena, I don't want an explanation yet," I said. "I just want to know if it's true." The silence stretched. She looked down at her wine glass. And then she said 3 words that I will hear for the rest of my life. It got out of hand. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because I have sat with it for years and I still feel it the same way I felt it that first time. It got out of hand. Not "I'm sorry." Not "I don't know what I was thinking." Not even a denial, which might have been easier to process. It got out of hand. As though the lie were a thing that had happened to her, rather than a thing she had done. As though she were the passenger and not the driver. I kept my face very still. "Tell me the rest," I said. She did. Slowly, in pieces, the way someone tells a story that sounds worse out loud than it did inside their head. It had started with Vantera. She hadn't planned to use what I told her. But when her agency was approached to pitch the same account, she had mentioned to her creative director that she had some background on Meridian's likely approach. Just background, she said. Just a starting point. The win energized her creative director. He pushed for more. He had a contact in Meridian's HR, Robert, and he used it. He coached Jess on what to allege and how. He told her it would just create some distance between me and the promotion. Level the field a little. And Jess, who had spent years watching the gap between our careers widen by inches, had found that she was not as resistant to this as she should have been. She started to cry while she told me. I knew her real crying and I knew her performed crying, and what I was looking at was something in between. More honest than her performed version. Less honest than the moment required. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know that doesn't." "No," I said. "It doesn't." I asked her to leave. She said my name once more at the door. I didn't answer. I heard the door close and I sat at that table in the silence of my apartment, and I felt the full weight of 14 years pressing down on me all at once. Not just the betrayal. The friendship. The real parts. The 3-hour drive in the middle of the night. The hand at the funeral. All of it sitting in the same space as what I now knew, and the unbearable task of holding both things at the same time. I cried that night. Finally. The kind of crying that doesn't produce neat tears but comes from somewhere deeper and uglier and more honest. I let myself do it for exactly one night. And then I called Diane. What happened after that moved with a speed and precision that I had not let myself hope for. Diane helped me prepare a formal written account of everything, Jess's confession, the documented evidence, all of it, and I brought it to Helen at Meridian. I watched Helen read through it. She is not a woman who shows her reactions easily. But when she looked up from the last page, there was something in her face that I had never seen there before. A quiet, contained fury. "This should have been found in the original investigation," she said. "Yes," I said. "Robert facilitated this." "It appears so." She closed the folder and looked at me directly. "Leave this with me," she said. I left it with her. The next 2 weeks were quiet on the surface and I could feel everything moving underneath. Closed-door meetings. Unfamiliar HR people in the building. Robert, who I passed in the corridor twice during that period, looked straight ahead both times with a specific blankness of someone who already knows what is coming and has decided the only dignified response is to pretend they don't. At the end of the second week, Robert was placed on administrative leave. 3 weeks after that, he was gone. The original investigation was reopened with an external reviewer. When the revised conclusions came, they did not say insufficient evidence. They said the complaint had been filed in bad faith. They said my conduct had been without fault. They said it clearly and they put it in writing and they gave me a copy. I read that document 4 times. Helen called me into her office the morning it was issued. She offered me the creative director role. I said yes before she finished the sentence. Now I need to tell you what happened to Jess. Because this is the part of the story that I could not have written if I had tried. This is the part that made me understand something I had always half believed but never fully seen with my own eyes. The truth does not need your help to move. It just needs one crack in the wall. The same week Robert was placed on administrative leave, Jess's creative director was let go from her agency. Not because of me, not directly. There had been other things. Other corners cut, other people treated the way I had been treated, a pattern of behavior that had been accumulating long before I came into the picture. He had operated this way before, and it had finally become too expensive to ignore. When he left, he took his protection of Jess with him. Within days, an internal review at her agency opened questions about the Vantera pitch. How it had been won. What information had been used. Where it had come from. The questions were quiet at first, and then they weren't. I heard Jess had been placed on leave from a mutual professional contact. Not from Jess herself. I did not expect to hear from Jess herself. The review took 6 weeks. At the end of it, she was let go. Breach of professional ethics. Conduct unbecoming of a senior employee. Those were the words, according to what filtered through the network of people who know these things. She lost her job. She lost the Vantera account, which her agency lost entirely once the questions about the pitch became public. She lost her professional reputation in a market that is not as large as it appears from the inside. People know each other. People remember. The story of what she had done, the specific, deliberate, sustained nature of it, moved through our industry with the speed of something genuinely surprising. Because it was not a gray area. Not an ambition that went slightly too far. A deliberate campaign against the person she had called her closest friend. I want to be honest with you about something. I did not feel triumphant when I heard this. I know that might be hard to believe. And maybe there was something underneath everything else that felt, for a brief moment, like relief, like the score had been corrected, like the truth had finally shown up in a form that other people could see. But mostly I felt sad. Sad in the way you feel sad when you watch something avoidable happen anyway. Because Jess was not a monster. I need you to understand that. She was a person who had something in her, competitiveness, comparison, a hunger that she could not properly feed through honest means, and instead of working through it or talking about it or asking for help, she let someone with worse judgment than hers point it at me. That does not make what she did forgivable, but it makes it human. And the human part is what I have spent the most time with since all of this ended. Because here is the thing I want to say to you directly, and I mean directly to you, not to some general audience. I made a choice years before any of this happened. I saw something true about Jess and I set it aside because the rest of her felt worth it. I am not saying that choice caused what she did. Her choices caused what she did. But my choice, my deliberate decision to see the version of her I wanted rather than the version that was actually there, that choice removed a protection I could have had. I wonder sometimes what would have happened if I had said something. If I had named what I saw, out loud, in a real conversation. Not as an accusation. Just as something I had noticed and wanted to understand. Would it have changed anything? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe she was already too far into the pattern by the time I could see it clearly. But I would have known myself better. And knowing yourself better is always worth something. Marcus and I are getting married next spring. He never doubted me. Not once through any of it. The careful worry I saw in his eyes during the investigation was not doubt. It was love wearing the face of fear, which is different, and it matters to know the difference. I am creative director at Meridian. The role is everything I worked for it to be. My team is strong. I have been careful, in building it, to look for people who are genuinely good rather than people who are good at appearing to be good. That distinction has become important to me in a way it wasn't before. Jess is in a different city now, working in a different industry. That's all I know, and it's all I need to know. I hope she has found something honest to build on. I mean that the way I mean most things I say about her now, from a distance, without investment in the outcome, with a care that has been carefully emptied of expectation. What I have not been able to do, and may never do, is understand the face across the table. The lunches. The check-ins. The you know who you are, this will come out right. How do you sit across from someone you are destroying and say those words? How do you hold 14 years of real love in one hand and a lie designed to dismantle them in the other and just hold both, day after day, without one of them consuming the other? I have asked myself that question hundreds of times. The closest I have come to an answer is this. I think Jess had told herself a story in which she was not the villain, in which the complaint was just leveling the field, in which the rumor was just balancing a scale that had been tilted for too long, in which I had something she deserved and she was simply taking back what was owed. People are capable of extraordinary self-deception when the alternative is seeing themselves clearly. I know this now in a way I did not know it before. I know it about Jess. I know it about myself. And somehow knowing it about both of us at the same time has been the most useful thing to come out of all of this. The promotion is real. The marriage is coming. The life is mine in a way that cannot be filed against or asterisked or quietly dismantled by someone who knows which doors to knock on. And the thing I want to leave you with, the thing I would have wanted someone to say to me when I was sitting on that bathroom floor in the stall after Robert's meeting, is this. The truth is slower than a lie. A lie moves fast. It gets there first. It sets up camp in the room before you arrive. It shakes hands with everyone, offers to be a character reference, brings wine to dinner. But a lie requires maintenance. Constant, exhausting, invisible maintenance. It needs every piece to stay in place, every person to stay quiet, every thread to stay untouched. The truth only needs one thread to pull. And eventually, someone always pulls it. My life stayed standing. Jess's didn't. Not because I was better. Not because I was smarter. But because I was building on something real and she was building on something that required her to keep building. That difference shows up in the end. It always does. If you have a Jess in your life right now, someone you trust completely, someone whose edges you have been choosing not to see, I am not telling you to end the friendship. I am not telling you to become suspicious of everyone you love. I am just telling you to look clearly, to let yourself see what you see without immediately explaining it away. That's all. Just look. And if you're watching this and you are the one who has done something like what Jess did, if you are holding a lie right now that has gotten bigger than you meant it to, I want to say something to you too. Put it down. Not for the person you hurt. For yourself. Because the maintenance of a lie is the most expensive thing you will ever pay for, and the bill always comes eventually. Put it down. It is not too late to build something real. And that is where Elena's story ends. Or maybe that is where it finally begins. 14 years of real friendship. One lie that was supposed to be small. And a karma so precise and so complete that she never had to lift a finger to make it happen. If this story hit you somewhere real, leave a comment. Tell me if you have a Jess in your life. Tell me if you have ever been Elena. Tell me what you would have said at that dinner table. I read every single comment and I want to hear from you. And if you are new here, welcome to Success Wisdom Stories. Subscribe, because every week I bring you a story like this one, where the truth moves on its own, where patience is the most powerful thing in the room, and where looking clearly at the people you love is always, always worth it. I'll see you in the next one.